Okay, thank you so much for joining me today, Kate. I am really excited to have you in because you have a new book that we're going to be talking about that I think could help so many moms. And as I was reading through it, and of course, I started with the table of contents per your suggestion of like choosing your own adventure. Your book starts from pre-pregnancy all the way through to having kids, and I was like, "Yep, could have used that. Could have used that. I could have used all of these things pre-kids that you're talking about in your book." So really excited to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining me. Why don't you kind of introduce yourself to the group and say hello and talk a little bit about your journey with this book?
Sure. So my name's Kate Rope, and I am a journalist. I've been a journalist for my whole career. And I started writing about pregnancy and parenting when I got pregnant with my first child and really, really wanted to be a mom. It was the only thing I've ever known for sure that I wanted to do. And so I became a mom. I was pregnant. I had a difficult pregnancy, and I felt a little alienated by the books that were out there during my pregnancy because I was experiencing some things or having to go on medication or take certain tests. And you're just made to feel so afraid of every move you make in pregnancy. And I felt kind of like I was violating all the rules that I was reading in the books that were on my nightstand. So that was kind of the beginning of feeling like this, wanting there to be an inclusive conversation around this stuff. And then I had postpartum anxiety. I had very severe postpartum anxiety, which I didn't know was a thing. And so it took me a long time to recognize it till about my first daughter was 9 months old when I finally got medical help for it. I was going to therapy, but till I finally went on anti-anxiety medication. And that whole experience sort of sent me into a world of writing about motherhood and mental health. And I got a job working at a nonprofit in Manhattan, running their editorial, all their articles around all the challenges related to trying to become and being a mom, from infertility to child loss, miscarriage, postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. And that just became my world. And I just realized that we needed to have this conversation and we needed to support moms, whatever their struggles were. So I really wanted to write a book that just kind of normalized how big a thing this is. Like, it's a big, beautiful, hard thing, making a person or bringing a person into your home through extensive research if you're adopting or some other way, and then raising them. And to expect that to be easy seems crazy. So I wanted to normalize that it's hard, it's a struggle, and there's help for all the struggles you experience. And so one woman's struggle because she's having a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder like me and maybe needs medication or some professional help is no different than the mom who just can't get a break and can't sleep and needs some tips on how to sleep better. Nobody's struggle is better than another. It's just about getting the right help for whatever your struggle is. So I just wanted to write a book that said, here's kind of an honest look at what can happen. And if this happens, then let's do this. Or this could happen, so let's prepare a little bit for that. And cover all the realms of, pregnancy and your relationship and exercise and planning for birth in a realistic way. And so that was really it. I wanted to have an honest conversation that was open-minded, non-judgmental. And, it's not about do this kind of parenting or do that kind of parenting. It's about what's best for you and finding that and staying true to it.
Yeah, I have to say, I think one of the things that was I was really happy to see, this is a very all-encompassing book, and you grabbed experts and expert opinions, which I loved. And you have your own experience, obviously, but you tapped into some knowledge, right? And
yeah,
I loved hearing that. And then some of my favorite parts were from the moms that you talked to. So at the end of each chapter, you have what was it called?
Been there, done that.
Yes, the been there, done that section. Yeah, and you have quotes from moms kind of talking about the subject matter that you were speaking to in that chapter. And that kind of, as I'm reading, that kind of brought it back to reality. Like you can kind of read it and you can have the experts weigh in, but then to hear the moms talk about that particular topic, that really meant a lot to me, like personally, as I was reading it. I was like, okay, like people are experiencing, this is a real thing,
I think that's all it takes in motherhood. And I think we're getting better and better about admitting when we're having a hard time, but we still don't do it as a culture, as a community, as a country. And so but the magic of someone else saying, I get you, like that just releases so much angst that you have inside yourself about whatever you're worried or thinking about. So I really wanted that in there. And I wanted it to represent like all the different kinds of, you know, the moms who were like, I loved breastfeeding and I did it every moment. It was the best part of motherhood. And the moms that were like, it was horrible. It sucked. It made me sad. And I went on formula and my baby's happy. Like I wanted it to, so that whoever you were, you would find someone in that book who spoke to your experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I marked up my table of contents of all the sections that I would have loved to have heard ahead of time or that I'm experiencing now. But I do want to dive into at least one of the sections. So we're not going to dive into all of it. Obviously, people can read the book for themselves. But for my group and the moms that are in my group, I thought that in particular, the part 3 of the bigger picture of motherhood, the part that I think struck me the most, that I think my audience will really understand, is the good for her, but not for me. I thought that section in particular was very interesting, especially in the world of Facebook and Instagram and leading that perfect mom life and how easy it is to compare yourself in your motherhood journey to someone else. I want you to talk about that section a little bit more, because I thought it was an interesting approach to kind of being able to be solid in your own parenting choices and to be confident in that. So why don't you expand on that a little bit? Because I think our audience is going to really, really take to that.
Yeah. Well, first, let me give credit for that quote. It goes to Amy Poehler. And she said it about Maya Rudolph, who I guess had at least 2 home births or something, and someone was interviewing Amy Poehler about it, and Amy Poehler's quote was, good for her, not for me. And I was like, that's so great. Why can't we all be like that, you know? And I think it's very natural to not be like that, because we're new to this and we're trying to figure out what's right, and we're getting so many messages that there is something that's right. So I think it's the first thing I did was just say like, hey, this is normal. Like, to compare, to feel competitive is to be human. And a lot of times when you get somebody coming at you with a really strong opinion, or if you find yourself expressing a really strong opinion, it's often because you're trying to ground yourself in that too, you know? So it's understandable. But then just trying to come to terms, it's beautiful that we're all different. If we did everything the same, you know, we would be boring. And then that's just sort of a philosophical argument, but practically really surrounding yourself with people who validate not necessarily your individual choices, but your right to make them, who can understand why that works for your family, but is different than what they do for their family. And that if you find yourself in groups that are really going down one road with a certain kind of dogma, or you find yourself in friendships that you walk away from those interactions feeling less than, then reassessing, you know, who do I want to be with? And also experimenting, trying new things. And also one of the really great things that I learned from a parenting coach is the idea that your child lives in this community, and the community can bring different things that you can't bring. So if when your child goes to your friend's house, you find out that, you know, he ate the kale salad and like did 3 things he never does at home, instead of thinking, why can't I get him to do that? Thinking to yourself, oh, that's so great that he has a place to go do that, you know, or sort of recognizing that everyone's going to bring different strengths, and that for everything you question yourself on, other people are going to have other things that they question themselves on. And I think it's probably like a constant practice, like mindfulness or something, you know, it's not easy. I find myself doing it over certain things. But I think that it's also freeing. It's also freeing to realize that there isn't one way to raise a kid, and you don't have to jump to these conclusions about yourself when you're hearing from other moms something that you think you should be doing. You know, well, what's that should about? Is that right for your family? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that. I thought that really struck home with me anyway. And in terms of like the mindfulness, like I feel like I will try to be more purposeful and actually saying that phrase in my head. Like if something kind of strikes me and it kind of hits me where I'm like, oh shit, like maybe I should be doing that, then I hope I can kind of train myself to be better with saying, you know, good for her, not for me. and
Yeah.
I still want to be open to changes or to new practices. And I think that's obviously really, really good as well. But in the end, if it still isn't feeling right, to be able to let it go, and instead of, because you're constantly going to be in contact with the same people in the same group. And you don't want that kind of weighing on you every time you interact with that other mom or that other parent. And you want to be able to let it go. So I love that.
Also, everybody has their priorities, you
Right.
know? And so I think that's also, you know, there's some areas where I am kind of really uptight with my parenting, and areas where I'm loose, and I have friends who are the exact opposite, and we can kind of just laugh about it and just understand that for me, like, my kids need to be in bed by 8 o'clock so that I have a life and so that they are not monsters the next day. But I also think it's really cool, my friends who keep their kids out till 10:30 and their kids are running around the neighborhood. And every once in a while I try to do it and my kids have a great time, and then the next day is horrible. But, you know, just like in that moment, just thinking to myself, okay, but this is what works best for us, you know, and not judging myself on that.
Yeah, I love that. So I assume that you have some of these connections through your journalism background, but how did you get connected with all of the experts that you brought in for the book?
Some I had interviewed in the past, and then others I just kind of looked up books, or I asked people, I asked other moms or pregnant women, who are you paying attention to, who's writing stuff that you're interested in, and just kind of word of mouth.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I love it, because again, I think that's so important that it's not just, solely based on your own experience, but you were bringing in some heavy hitters, which I thought was good.
Yeah. I mean, I found this one therapist who runs with her clients. I thought that was so cool. And she works exercise into her treatment for mood disorders. And I met some really interesting people during the process. It was really fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. So through this experience, and you've obviously had to talk to a ton of moms to research this book and gather content for it, what would you say was maybe the most common problem that you found with women post-pregnancy, so post-birth, new baby? What would you find to be their biggest pain point, something that they struggle with the most after just having a baby?
I mean, after just having a baby, I think it would be sleep and having no time to themselves. A little bit beyond that, I would say the one question, so I did a survey and I sent it to 300 moms, I think. The one question that almost nobody had an answer for was, how do you forgive yourself? How are you kind to yourself in moments where you feel like you make a mistake? And people either didn't have an answer, or they said, I don't do that. So that to me was like a huge area of learning. And so I have a section on self-compassion. And the importance of it, not just for you, but first and foremost for you. But then it also, if you need the argument that goes to the kid to make you do the change, modeling that for your children, modeling being kind to yourself in moments of stress and in mistakes. So there's self-compassion exercises in there that I've been doing. But immediately postpartum, definitely sleep and, finding time for yourself and just feeling like, where have I gone to?
Yeah, I can totally relate.
Yeah. And it's a process, I have very practical stuff in there about how to get sleep. I'm not that's not theoretical. I spoke with sleep experts about how to get good sleep and kind of the minimum that you need to function at a base level. You need these 3-hour chunks of sleep in order to go through a full sleep cycle. And so how to figure that out if you have a partner, how you figure that out with bottle feeding, how do you figure that out with breastfeeding and pumping? If you don't have a partner, raising money to have a night nurse or recruiting friends and relatives, sleeping in a room separate from the baby when you're getting your solid chunks of sleep so that you're not being stirred by the baby. So I have very practical advice in there on that. But for the identity aspect of it, I think that's just an evolving process. And I think being able to talk honestly with other moms about what you're going through is one of the most valuable things you can do at that time.
Yeah, kind of finding that tribe, even if it's just 1 or 2 people, to be able to really share those intimate details of things that you think that nobody else is going through. That's really key.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is probably one of the most surprising things that you learned through writing this book? Something that came up, maybe a chapter you didn't think you would write, or something that one of the experts mentioned that kind of struck you?
So I interviewed Dan Savage for my sex chapters, and he kind of blew my mind.
Oh, do tell.
So I had been interviewing sex therapists, and I have some great ones in the book, and I don't want to knock them, but they kind of talk in therapist talk. And I think a lot of us, it's hard enough to talk about sex, but then when it gets kind of like clinical or academic or something that doesn't help you feel like you're going to get somewhere.
Right.
I really wanted to interview Esther Perel, who has this new amazing book out on infidelity, and she wrote this book, Mating in Captivity, about what happened, about how there's sort of this conflict between what we want in a lifetime partner versus what we would want in a sexual partner, and how you're navigating that in a marriage. And someone told me that once upon a time, she said you should have 16 months after the birth of a child before you should even feel like you have to have sex. And I really wanted that quote in there because I was just through the 6-week checkup.
Yes.
Give me 16 months. But I couldn't get her on the phone because she was writing this new book. So I talked to Dan Savage, and basically he was like, every gay encounter starts with, what are you into? And there's so many different answers to that. And for straight couples, and my book is geared towards, 2 mom families and mom and dad families, and single mom families. But he was talking about sort of heterosexual sex, and he's like, penetration is the end goal and anything else is a consolation prize. And that attitude really can put a damper on you for the first year plus of having a baby. So he's like, you need to get out of that mindset. And he was like, and I don't know how your group feels about this, but he was like, mutual masturbation, hand jobs for both of you, oral sex. Like if you start even in pregnancy, mixing up your repertoire so that those are just faster, easier, especially if you're having a physical recovery from a vaginal birth or a C-section. So he was the one that kind of gave me a paradigm shift in like, we need to stop thinking about sex once we become parents. I mean, we should probably do this from
the get-go.
but I'm dealing with parenthood, and like, we need to stop thinking about it as like, if you're not having penetrative vaginal sex, you're not having sexual relations. Like you should be, and then ways to be intimate without it. Like, and he didn't so much come up with these, but like reading books to each other, because there are times after you have a kid, for me, there were a lot of them. I did breastfeed, and I was like, I don't want any other on my body.
Yeah.
Like,
stop touching me.
I don't even want, like, nothing. So, but read to me, so my husband would read to me in bed. Ways to just get enough of that intimacy here and there and kind of keep the flame alive just enough so that when you're ready, you can turn crank the knob and it can go higher. So
I dig that.
Yeah, that to me. And I try to get stuff like that in the book because I feel like so often you read self-help books and they're like, just start exercising 10 minutes a day or just do this. And it's like, okay, but what does that really look like? How do I actually do that? And so for the exercise chapter, I was like, get your phone, and before you walk out that door to walk to the mailbox or whatever you're capable of that day, rate your mood on a scale of 1 to 10. And then when you come back, rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And then watch that over time and just see for yourself, because it's so easy to forget those things. You walk in the door, the baby starts screaming, you take her out of the carrier, she's got a poopy diaper, and then you forget that you just felt human for 4 minutes. So keeping track, proving to yourself the value of exercise, because it can be so, and I'm talking moving your body. I'm not talking about training for a marathon unless that's your thing. But proving to yourself the value of things. I really wanted small doable things that don't add to your to-do list, because as a parent, like, the last thing you want is another thing that you feel like you're not getting to. So I wanted to say, let's prioritize the things that will really make you feel better and then figure out how to work them in.
I dig it. I especially like kind of keeping track of those moments where you are human again, because they are few and far between, and between the haze and the sleeplessness and just the constant tasks of having a new baby, you just don't even think you're human at all. But there are moments where, the baby is sleeping and maybe you do get to shower and those kind of things you need to celebrate, and we don't do a good job of that. but man, I dig all of that. I dig all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody, I think we've got one person joining us live. So Brian, if you have a question, let me know. Otherwise, if you're catching this on the replay, grab the comments and put them in the, if you have a question, put them in the comments and I will make sure Kate answers them. But Kate, where can people find you? Where can they find your book? And how can they kind of learn more about all this?
Yeah. So my book, you can find anywhere books are sold. It's online on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore. And I would love it if anybody happens to have a relationship with their local bookseller, you know, maybe your, you know, a children's bookstore that you frequent a lot, go in there and say, hey, have you heard about this book, Strong as a Mother? Because then they'll start carrying it if they aren't already. Yeah, anywhere books are sold, and it's on Kindle, and it's an audiobook, and I'm narrating the audiobook. So
nice.
Sound of my voice, do that. If you don't. I'm at katerope.com, and I'm on Twitter at Kate Rope, and Instagram, I think I'm at Strong as a Mother Book.
Yes. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, to anybody that's going to be watching this replay, there is something in this book for you. Like, guaranteed there is something that like I said, we're just going in and just taking notes. I'm like, yeah, I could have used all this pre-baby and now I can use a lot of it post-baby. So there's definitely something in there for you if this is a good nightstand book for sure.
Yeah, I split it into 3 sections. I did the first section is pregnancy. The second section is kind of that first survival year. And the third section is sort of the more philosophical approaches to, you know, the pressures we put on ourselves, the pressures society puts on us, and also getting really real about self-care and like not just like go get a mani-pedi, like, you know, figuring out what actually feeds your soul and learning how to work it into your life. So
love it. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad you were able to come in. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay,
bye. Bye.